This is the Nutrition Newsroom, a special monthly segment of the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast where we break down the latest nutrition headlines. I'm your host, Colleen Sloan. I'm a PA, dietitian, and your nutrition mentor. So in just 15 minutes today, I'll tell you what's trending, why it matters, and how to explain it to your patients so you can stay the trusted provider with the facts and answers they need. So today's headlines include the FDA banning red number 3, my take on a new food label that's been proposed, and the most insane case of high cholesterol you've ever seen. Now, can you guess which trendy diet is the culprit? All that coming up right now. On January 15th, 2025, the FDA announced that it will revoke the use of FD&C red number 3 in food and ingested drugs by 2027. The move is based on the Delaney Clause of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which bans food additives shown to cause cancer in humans or animals. Now, fun fact, it's named that after its congressional sponsor, Representative James Delaney. This decision follows a 2022 petition from advocacy groups highlighting studies where red 3 caused thyroid tumors in male rats. So the FDA concluded that while these effects are specific to rats, red 3 meets the Delaney Clause criteria. So here's what you need to know. What exactly is red number 3? It's a synthetic petroleum-based dye that gives food its bright cherry red color. It's been used in candies like Airheads, Ring Pops, and Broch's candy corn, as well as frostings, cookies, and even some medications. While the Environmental Working Group identified over 2,000 products containing red 3, the FDA estimates its use is relatively limited in the United States. Now, it's important to be aware that advocacy groups often overstate the health risks of additives and substances such as food dyes. Many of these entities, including the Environmental Working Group, create their own, quote, safe intake levels of different ingredients that are far below the levels that have been scientifically proven to be safe. So what does the science say? Now, the studies driving this decision involved rats consuming very high doses of red 3. They ingested about 4% of their body weight daily for months. So to put this into perspective, for a 150-pound person, that's equivalent to eating 102 grams of red 3 every single day for months. Now, the average person's exposure to red 3 is 0.2 milligrams per day, which is 7,500 times less than the doses tested in these studies. The thyroid tumors observed in rats are also linked to a hormonal mechanism unique to their species and is not seen in humans. No human studies have shown harm at typical exposure levels. So what might your patient be asking you? First thing they might want to know is, why is red 40 still allowed? So red 3 and red 40 are chemically distinct dyes. While red 3 caused cancer in rats, red 40 has not demonstrated similar effects in animal studies and is therefore still permitted under U.S. regulations. But let's linger here and talk about red 40 and artificial food dyes in general. Currently, there are 9 certified color additives approved by the FDA for use in food. Of these, 3 dyes, red number 40, yellow number 5, and yellow number 6, account for 90% of the artificial food dye used in products sold in the United States. This is according to the Center for Science in the Public Interest. While these dyes are considered food safe under FDA regulations, many consumers are becoming increasingly wary of products containing artificial colors. Studies have suggested links between high levels of food dyes and hyperactivity in children, and some dyes, including red 40, contain trace amounts of carcinogens like benzidine. However, these levels are considered too low to pose significant health concerns. Now, red number 40, approved by the FDA in the 1970s, remains one of the most widely used food colorings. In recent years, though, concerns have grown over its potential safety risks, including allergic reactions, and like I said before, possible links to behavioral issues in children. Now, the evidence, however, remains inconclusive, and we do need more research in this area. Now, California is already leading the charge with stricter regulations. And starting in 2027, public schools in that state will no longer be allowed to serve foods containing artificial food dyes, including red 40, green 3, blue 1 and 2, and yellow 5 and 6. This could signal a shift toward broader restrictions on synthetic dyes in the future as consumer demand for natural ingredients continues to grow. Now, when discussing this with patients, it's helpful to acknowledge their concerns, but also offer guidance. For patients worried about their children's behavior, I would encourage that they track the child's food intake and note any changes depending on the food that they're eating. For those wanting to avoid artificial dyes, suggest looking for naturally colored or dye-free products, which are becoming more widely available. For example, some alternatives to red 3 include carmine. This is actually made from insects, and pigments from purple sweet potato, radish, and red cabbage. The next question you might hear is, why do some countries ban artificial dyes altogether? So a great answer would be that regulatory approaches vary. The US bans additives linked to cancer in animal studies, while other countries focus on human health data and adopt stricter limits instead of outright bans. The patient might be asking, what should I look on a food label? So instruct your patient to look for terms like FD and C, red number 3, erythrocene, or simply red 3. Encourage them to check the ingredients list, particularly on brightly colored candies and frostings. And the last question they might want to know is, does this mean foods with red 3 are unsafe? I would encourage you to reassure your patients that the levels of red 3 in food are extremely low and are not associated with harm. The ban is regulatory and precautionary, not a response to immediate health risks. So let's look at the bigger picture. I want to address the elephant in the room. Will banning red 3 make Americans healthier? My short answer is honestly not really. And here's why. The foods containing red 3, like candies and frostings, are already not nutritionally significant. Removing one ingredient will not improve that food's overall nutrition. The switch to an alternative coloring in qualifying foods might actually increase food costs. The switch will likely be to naturally derived colorings that are less stable and more expensive, resulting in increased food prices for consumers. I think health challenges in the US are way broader than food dye. So consider this. 90% of Americans don't meet daily fiber recommendations. Food deserts still persist, which limits access to affordable fresh produce. And with rising healthcare costs, healthy lifestyle is out of reach for many people. Now, health is really complex, and removing a single dye from the food supply is a regulatory win, but it's not the answer to improving public health. Demonizing a single ingredient and linking them without adequate science to poor health outcomes or chronic diseases like cancer is an oversimplification of a complex situation. It's really important to understand that one food ingredient is not likely to cause cancer or other health issues on its own. The totality of your patient's diet, as well as their lifestyle and genetics, are contributing factors in many cases. So what's the key takeaway? When patients ask about red 3, here's how to frame the conversation. Reassure them that the amounts consumed in foods are far below the levels of concern. Focus on big picture nutrition advice. Encourage them to prioritize whole, minimally processed foods that provide the nutrients their bodies need. And lastly, if they want to avoid synthetic dyes altogether, recommend looking for products labeled as dye-free or containing natural colorants like beetroot powder and turmeric. On to story number 2. I've titled it, New Label, Who Dis? Now, if you're a millennial, please laugh with me. I hope you remember this slang. If you got a new phone, you would text someone saying, new phone, who dis? But for real, this is new. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has proposed a new front-of-package nutrition labeling system known as the Nutrition Info Box. It's aimed at helping consumers make healthier dietary choices. This label would display simplified information about a food product's content of saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, categorizing each as low, medium, or high. This approach is designed to complement the existing nutrition facts label, which is on the back of products, by providing an accessible summary of key nutritional information. Current federal dietary guidelines recommend limiting intakes of these 3 nutrients to maintain a nutrient-dense diet within calorie limits. Now, I think it's an interesting proposition that might help consumers make smarter choices, but I'm skeptical. Now, I shared this with my audience on LinkedIn, and here were some of the comments on that post. If you want to join in the conversation, I've linked down to it in the show notes, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Exam Room Nutrition. So my buddy Douglas Kalman said, sadly, I do not see this proposed label making much more of a difference than any of the other prior labels over the past 25 to 50 years. People are going to eat what they want to or wish to versus what might be suggested as better or worse for their health. I do not see this label making a dent in obesity, hypertension, or diabetes, and I am sad for such. I agree. My PA friend and fellow podcaster, Tracy Bingaman, which shout out to her podcast, The PA is In. It's fantastic. Go check it out. She asked, are consumers being educated about these ranges and what might they mean for them? Which I actually thought was a great question that I want to unpack with you. So the percent daily value shows how much a nutrient in a serving of that food contributes to a total daily diet. It can basically help you determine if a serving of food is considered high or low in a specific nutrient. So real quick, raise your hand if you know what it means for a food to be considered high. Would it be 10% daily value, 15%, 40%? If you don't know, don't worry. Usually only dietitians know this. So real quick, according to the FDA, 5% daily value or less of a nutrient per serving is considered low. 20% daily value or more of a nutrient per serving is considered high. So like Tracy had said, unless you educate your patient on exactly what this means for them, it's kind of useless information. Now, to complicate things more, the daily values are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Plus, if someone were to consume more than the calculated serving size, a once low daily value food could turn into a high one just because of how much the person ate. Now, I'll link to a few resources below if you wanted to dig into this a little bit further. But remember, the daily value is calculated based on the food's serving size. So again, if the patient is unknowingly eating 2 or 3 times that daily value is sort of negligent. And lastly, Emily Valeska said, interesting, it's definitely more user-friendly, but the grams and percentage both require an explanation. And I couldn't agree more. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to weigh in on this story, just check out this post on LinkedIn. All right, the last headline I want to share is a case published by JAMA Cardiology on January 22nd, 2025. So here's the case. A 40-year-old male presented to the ED with a 3-week history of painless yellow nodules on his palms, soles, and elbows. Now, real quick, what should your first question be? Well, you're listening to a nutrition podcast, so of course I'm going to say, ask about his diet. Duh. Now, this man had been following the carnivore diet for 8 months. According to this paper, he was eating 6 to 9 pounds of cheese, sticks of butter, and additional fat would be incorporated into his daily hamburgers. Now, although he reported weight loss, increased energy, and improved mental clarity, which is exactly what the influencers will tell you, his cholesterol level was, get this, 1,000 milligrams per deciliter. That's insane. His baseline was 210 to 300. Now, there's probably much more we need to know about this picture, and no, this does not happen for everybody following a carnivore diet. However, unfortunately, when patients just blindly follow advice they hear or see on social media without any medical professional's guidance or help, this can happen. Likely, this patient had some form of familial hypercholesterolemia, or he may be a hyperresponder to cholesterol. I'm not sure. But this is why it's really, really important to work with a medical professional if you are going to be following any kind of restrictive diet. The study actually linked a very interesting picture of his hands with cholesterol deposits on them. And this is known as palmar exanthoma. And you may even remember exanthelasma from school, which is actually the cholesterol deposits around the eye. So you could see it on someone's eyelid. So really interesting case, and I'll link down to it if you wanted to take a look at that picture. But if your patients are following a carnivore diet, here's what I would suggest you do today. Number 1, ask if they incorporate any fiber at all. Remember, a carnivore diet is strictly animal-based only. It's different from a ketogenic diet, but these carnivores do not incorporate any beans, any nuts, seeds, fruits, or vegetables. So they're getting zero fiber. And we know the importance of fiber in one's diet. The studies have proven it over and over again. Number 2, check their cholesterol levels routinely. Now, while this man's case was extreme, and like I said, he may be a hyper responder to cholesterol, it is really important to monitor your patient's lipids if they choose to follow this dietary pattern. And lastly, I would strongly encourage they follow a more balanced diet. Now, I am in no way anti-meat or anything like that, which someone accused me of on Instagram, which of course the haters are going to hate. But we have a plethora of research that shows the benefits of a high fiber diet. So when giving nutrition advice, please don't just follow the trends, follow the science, and lead your patients properly. Like I said, this case study was published in JAMA Cardiology, and I have linked to it below. Go check it out because the photo really is incredible. Well, that's it for this month's episode of the Nutrition Newsroom. Thanks for joining me as we broke down this month's nutrition headlines. Before you go, let's take a deep breath together. In a world of constant headlines and nutrition buzzwords, it's really easy to get caught up in fear-mongering. But you, my friend, have the tools and knowledge to be the calm in the chaos for your patients. Now, if you love this episode, snap a screenshot and share it on social media. Tag me with your favorite takeaway for a chance to win a pair of compression socks from Lily Trotters. And until next time, I'm Colleen Sloan, your guide to staying calm, confident, and credible in the ever-changing world of nutrition. See you next time.